As you know, President Juncker made the last attempt this weekend to find, via personal representatives and in close liaison with the other institutions, a solution with Prime Minister Tsipras that would allow for a positive assessment in time for the Eurogroup scheduled on the 18th of June. While some progress was made, the talks did not succeed as there remains a significant gap between the Greek plans and the joint requirements of the institutions. Let me make clear that the Commission is a mediator in these talks, is not a creditor. The creditors to the Hellenic Republic are the 18 other democracies of the Eurozone and the international community through the IMF. So our role yesterday, during this weekend, was to create the conditions for a unanimous agreement between Greece's creditors. President Juncker is disappointed that despite his consistent and great efforts to facilitate progress in these talks, this progress was not so evident. But still, as we said yesterday, we stand ready, if there is something new, to engage with the Commission. Our Commission building and the President's office are open 24/7. So if there is anything new, we would be very happy to contribute as mediators in taking these talks further. On the other question that you raised of a specific number of issues that have been reported or misreported, I think this is a good opportunity to ask Annika to come and give you on the record the Commission position on the issues that are out there as a consequence of leaks or misreporting. I think it's an opportunity to set the record straight. Annika.
Thanks. As Margarita says, the package proposed by the institutions is substantial, it's balanced, and it makes full economic sense. The proposals meet the needs of the Greek people, the Greek government, but also of the other 18 member states who also are democratically accountable. There are 5 main pillars to the proposals from the institution side. 1, a sizable and credible fiscal adjustment. Greece would commit to achieve a primary surplus target of 2% of GDP in 2016 and to reach 3.5% of GDP by 2018. Secondly, important measures to improve the tax administration, for instance, through the establishment of an independent tax and customs administration and the fight against tax evasion. Thirdly, a concerted effort to strengthen the stability of the financial system, for instance, through a strategy to tackle non-performing loans. Fourth, growth-enhancing structural reforms, for instance, by preserving the progress in the labor market, moving ahead with lower prices through greater opening of product markets. And finally, the modernization of the public sector, including through the fight against corruption. Now, all these measures are very much in line with the 20th February Eurogroup statement and have been discussed at length within the Brussels group. Now, as I've said, these are concessions already made. Let's move to the individual topics. Fiscal targets. The fiscal targets for 2015 have already been substantially revised downwards to previous commitments. A primary fiscal surplus of 1% of GDP is now requested, which is substantially below the 3% of GDP program target. The reduction is actually bigger than what can be attributed to the effects of the economic cycle alone, which was what was agreed by the Eurogroup on 20th February. The medium-term fiscal target has also been revised downwards from 4.5% of GDP to 3.5% of GDP. This is a major concession. Also, the deadline for reaching this target has been pushed back by 2 years to 2018. The budget targets incorporate, on top of that, the humanitarian measures adopted in February 2015. They also strongly promote the rollout of a guaranteed minimum income scheme that would protect the most vulnerable, this scheme to be rolled out in 2016. By now, the Greek authorities agree to this target. The question is, how credible the commitments are to achieve those targets. And there, let's talk about pension cuts, which is, to prevent any misunderstanding. It is a gross misrepresentation of facts to say that the institutions are calling or have called for cuts in individual pensions. Yes, the pension system is one of the most expensive parts of spending. It's also one of the most expensive pension systems in Europe, and therefore a reform of the pension system is part of the requirements. The institutions, again, are not and have not asked for cuts in individual pensions. The reform is about phasing out early retirement, about prolonging pension age, about removing incorrect incentives for early retirement. It is also about making the Greek pension system financially sustainable in the long run and efficient, for instance, by merging the different schemes that are available. The institutions, according to their joint assessment, had concluded that the pension reform should yield about 1% of GDP each year. The suggestion from the Greek authorities was for 71 million euros in 2016. That is less than 0.4% of GDP. Likewise, on wage cuts, it is not true that the institutions are calling for new cuts in wages. They are calling for the modernization of the wage grid of the public sector in a fiscally neutral manner, and for preservation of wage practices in the private sector in line with international best practices, and also bearing in mind the very high level of unemployment in Greece. This does not necessarily imply wage cuts, but rather that wages should grow in line with productivity and competitiveness needs of the economy. As President Juncker has already said on numerous occasions, the proposal also opens the way for a modernization of collective bargaining, provided this is done properly, involving independent bodies and international organizations such as the OECD and ILO. Let's move to VAT rates. Greece has a very fragmented VAT system, and everybody agrees it is both necessary and useful to improve VAT collection. The authorities have proposed to significantly broaden the tax base at a standard rate of 23%, reflecting the need to protect the disposable income of low-income households. The authorities have also proposed a reduced rate to cover a limited number of goods, plus a super reduced rate of 6% on a very limited number of items. The institutions have made clear that there is scope to discuss the proposals of the authorities, provided the numbers add up. As part of the efforts to promote fairness, the reform should also streamline exemptions, serve to combat fraud, and increase compliance. This is a fair and progressive package. I think that should be a basis to exclude some of the misunderstandings that may arise. And again, as Margaritis has also said, the institutions have made a number of concessions. We're always ready to discuss, but we need to take into account, and that's what the institutions have been doing, the needs of the Greek people, the Greek government, and the other 18 member states.
Ian.
Are international organizations such as the OECD involved in any collective bargaining in any other Eurozone country?
Annika just said that as part of this comprehensive package that now you have on the record, it was clearly made clear to the Brussels group discussions that the Commission would be willing, and the other institutions, to consider a collective bargaining scheme that would reflect the highest European standards. And as guarantors of such a scheme, we think that both the OECD and the ILO would be better placed to provide such a blueprint. Peter.
Late last night, Olivier Blanchard, the chief economist of the IMF, posted on the IMF website a critique of both the European and Greek side of this negotiation, and I guess for the first time publicly calling for debt relief even under the plan you just described, saying there would have to be at least extensions of the maturities of the current bailout loans, and if there are any further relaxation of those surplus targets you just articulated, there would have to be haircuts. Now, haven't publicly said this before. It seems to be a pretty direct critique of the European position. I wonder if you have any comments on that blog post. Thanks.
Let me first of all use the opportunity to say that I stated the 71 million proposal on pension reforms represented 0.4% of GDP. Obviously, that is wrong. It is a 0.04% of GDP. As for your question, Peter, the interview states the view of the IMF. The political reality is that there is a need for progress and renewed trust in the talks to conclude the current program, and this should be the basis for any discussion about post-June.
Manoli?
Oui, Annika, si j'ai bien compris, vous avez dit que vous ne proposez pas de coûts aux retraites et que ça peut suffire le prolongement de l'âge de la retraite. De l'autre part, les Grecs disent que ça ne suffit pas seulement le prolongement, il faut trouver aussi d'autres sources, mais que les créanciers n'acceptent pas les autres sources. Alors je voudrais demander, même si vous ne proposez pas des coupes à la retraite, si finalement on ne trouve pas d'autres sources, vous accepterez des coupes à la retraite? Et deuxième question, si j'ai bien vu le communiqué d'hier, vous indiquez qu'il y a une différence d'à peu près 2 milliards d'euros. Et de l'autre part, la Commission, tous les facteurs disent qu'ils ont un esprit de flexibilité. Mais là, je suis un peu perdu. Si on ne peut pas résoudre un problème de 2 milliards qui relativement n'est pas très suffisant, très indicatif, où est la flexibilité ici? Merci.
Okay, on the first question, it is up to the government, the Greek government, to propose the best way forward. All we want is that the numbers add up. So, the proposals by the Greek government would have to obviously go substantially above 71 million euros. On the second question, the second question was? Flexibility, yes. As I've said, the targets have already been significantly lowered. If you look at the medium-term surplus targets, for instance, the 4.5% has been reduced to 3.5%, and the deadline or the target time for reaching that has been extended by 2 years. I believe the concessions overall that have been made and the flexibility that has been shown is quite substantial, and it's not a one-way street.
James.
Thanks. Have you planned for what have you done to plan for the state of emergency that your Commissioner Oettinger has called for? He's basically said it's chaos in Greece after July 1, so what are you doing to plan for that as he has called for? Thanks.
We have been very busy negotiating an agreement. That's what I have to say. Yes, Jorge.
If an agreement is not reached by Thursday, will there be time to conclude the program by the end of June? And a second question, if I may. Over the last months, you've been very reluctant to make public all the details of the negotiations because you said that will make the negotiations itself more complex. So I was wondering why today you announce and detail all the specific details, although we knew because of the media leaks.
On your question, the only deadline we now have is the 30th of June, which is the date where the Greek program expires. We have a Eurogroup Eurogroup meeting on the 18th, which we would have preferred to be held with something that would have emerged from this weekend. This was not possible, so these are the time limits in which we work. As for the details that Annika just gave you on the record, I think this was a moment to do it because, as Athanasios and many others probably have seen, There has been a number of misreporting out there, a number of alleged arguments, and I think that Annika's comprehensive and on-the-record account allows for everybody to see where we are. Who else? Someone standing then. Do you have a mic? Yeah. Alex.
Thank you. One question for you and one for Annika. Does President Juncker have any intention to stay involved in the coming days in the efforts, notwithstanding anything that happens on the level of negotiations? Is he planning to speak to Mrs. Lagarde, to any of the national leaders in the Eurozone? Could you give us an idea, or has he washed his hands of this after yesterday's failure? And Annika, one question on the details. Collective bargaining. Is that really such a crucial part of this package, given that a right-of-center government that preceded Mr. Tsipras's couldn't move on this point, and now the creditors are asking a government that is not just left of center, but left of center? Thank you.
You missed my statements earlier where I said exactly what President Juncker, how he feels and how he thinks. I can give you the gist of it, that he remains convinced that if there is something new, that if they have stronger reform efforts on the Greek side and political will from all sides, a solution can still be found before the end of the month. As for the collective bargaining, I don't think that Annika profiled this as the issue, but it was one of the pieces of the puzzle as we presented it today in full transparency. Jean-Jacques.
Oui, une question de suivi sur la sortie de M. Oettinger ce matin concernant la possible nécessité d'un état d'urgence en Grèce à partir du 1er juillet. Excuse-moi, mais pour un journaliste, ça rejoint ce qui avait été dit à la suite de la réunion du groupe de travail de l'Eurogroupe à Bratislava, le plan B. Je pense par ailleurs que M. Oettinger a ici un ou une porte-parole qui pourrait nous expliquer ce qu'il a voulu dire, ou si ce n'est pas le cas, est-ce que la Commission se distancie des propos du commissaire Oettinger?
Jean-Jacques, c'est à toi de faire l'évaluation de ce qu'on dit ici au nom du collège du président Juncker. Je peux répéter à la réponse que j'ai donnée à James que sur ce dossier, c'est le président qui est personnellement impliqué et nos deux membres du collège en charge, c'est le vice-président Dombrovskis et le commissaire Moscovici. Je n'ai rien d'autre à ajouter. Christian.
Oui, je voudrais revenir sur ce qu'a dit Annika sur la possibilité de trouver d'autres financements que les coupes. Et je voudrais savoir si les dépenses de défense ont été mises sur la table à un moment ou à un autre, et qui les a mises et qui les refuse. Et ma deuxième question, M. Varoufakis ce matin a dit qu'un accord pouvait être trouvé en une nuit, à la seule condition que Mme Merkel participe à la réalisation de cet accord. Alors je voudrais savoir si c'est faisable et si on peut attendre pour débloquer la situation le sommet européen des 25 et 26. Merci.
Pour ta première question, ce n'est pas un secret que les dépenses du budget grec pour la défense sont le deuxième en hors de mesure après celle du Royaume-Uni, je pense. Alors, effectivement, la question des dépenses budgétaires, quand on parle dans un contexte financier dans lequel se trouve le pays, c'est de facto posé. Mais comme Annika et moi on dit, ça c'est pas à la Commission de prendre ces décisions, c'est une décision, comme toutes les décisions qu'on vient d'exposer ici, qui doivent être considérées par le gouvernement hellénique, qui est la seule responsable pour s'engager devant les institutions sur ces priorités financières. Concernant la deuxième question sur un appel de M. Varoufakis à la chancelière Merkel, je pense que c'est une question qui devrait être posée à la salle de presse du gouvernement fédéral allemand, pas à la salle de presse de la Commission. Yes, please.
I'd like to know if today or tomorrow Mr. Draghi and Mr. Juncker will have a meeting, a special meeting on Greece.
I announced in my opening statement that Mr. Juncker invites Mr. Draghi or lunch, working lunch today, ahead of Mr. Draghi's speech to the Econ Committee of the European Parliament later this afternoon. And this meeting is also in liaison with the five presidents' report lunch that is happening today in this building.